Hey everyone, this is Mark with the Aquatic Nature Studio. I'm going to be coming out with a series of videos that discuss creative process in aquascaping. And so creative process for aquascaping is meant to allow you to come up with a way to work so that you can actually take your ideas from within your mind or from within nature and transpose those into an aquarium layout. So aquascaping is much like any other design-oriented field, especially in a digital world where we work with Photoshop. You can think of the aquascape or the layout and your process as working in a layered process. So you're going to be constructing, from the background, foreground, midground, and you're going to be playing with these layers in between. You'll be building up, you're going to be coming up with ways of shading, ways of actually enhancing detail, but also at the same time, you're going to be creating one central image. So in aquascaping, the first thing you need to think about since you're dealing with aquariums is whether or not you want to be working within a large or a small aquarium. So when you're deciding on the aquarium that you want to work with, you want to think about it as a canvas. Now the canvas is three-dimensional, so you actually have play in the actual length and height, which is the viewer's side of it. And that's something that you're going to be only seeing if you take this as a photograph. Now, when you're thinking about your aquarium and it's something that's supposed to be interactive with the viewer in that they can see it from different angles, you now have the third element, which is going to be the depth of the aquarium. So as you start working your way through the rimless aquariums and the different options that are out there, all of the manufacturers have a different tweak on it. So there are some aquariums, even though they have the same length and height dimensions, they start to play with the depth of the aquarium. So it may not seem like a lot if there's a 1-inch difference in the depth of the aquarium. It's actually something that can become very significant and can drastically change the way that you need to think about your designs and your layout. So perhaps that 1 inch of depth is pretty significant because 1 inch in a realm of a 36-inch tank can be the difference between something successfully looking far away and also looking way too close. So your next step is to understand your creative process. One of the ways you can create your layout is through a sketch. So a conceptual sketch can be done in a couple different ways. So one, you can just draw a box, draw what you have in mind, put it on the piece of paper, and that's it. Now another way you can go about it, you can come up with a grid using graph paper, and you can actually come up with a detailed drawing that is dimensionally accurate to your aquarium. And what this allows you to do is, if you're not comfortable yet with layout materials and you don't understand how much material you need, how much hardscape, how many plants, if you're working with a dimension drawing, it's always going to be. That's not true. I think the best way to go and actually explain this to you is to show it to you. So let's go make a couple drawings. I can break it down. You can see the couple examples, and now you can incorporate that perhaps into your workflow. Let's check that out. Now that you've got your piece of paper, you're going to want to establish the size of your aquarium. Here I'm working with a piece of graph paper that has 36 boxes across, 28 boxes vertically. Since we're working with a 60 centimeter aquarium, we will want to divide all dimensions in half for it to fit this sheet. In this case, we will have 30 boxes by 15 boxes. Here we will begin sketching our layout. We will want to identify where the soil line goes, so we will draw that. And we'll also want to identify any elevated soil areas that could become focal points for planting or possibly supporting the stones later. In this case, we'll begin by drawing the primary stone, followed by any secondary or supporting stones, as well as any detail pieces that we need to add eventually over time to infill any strategic areas that we think we might need. And we can also identify what the size is of each of these stones. So our primary stone, when measured out, comes to 11 boxes in length, which converts to 22 centimeters in total length. Now, this doesn't account for any depth that you may need to think about, but those are things that will just get you started once you go to the store and you need to actually start selecting the pieces that will work for this layout. So right now you have your drawing, you have your list, you're gonna go to the store. You're gonna head to one of your landscaping suppliers, you're gonna head to an aquascaping store, an aquarium shop. So when you're looking at the store's selection of stone, keep in mind that some stones are going to be more successful in your layout than others. So you want to think about the colors, you want to think about the texture of the stone, the shapes of the stone, if there's any striations in that stone, how you can actually utilize the differences in the color. Even though it's the same stone, there may be differences as far as one may be grayer than another, one may be blacker than another. One could be lighter, one could be, off with a little reddish hue. So how can you actually take the pieces that you're finding and create something that's going to be interesting to anyone viewing that aquarium? So that's one way you can get to the point of creating your layout. Now, another way you can think about it is you can go out to one of these landscape stores, to your aquascaping store, buy stone in bulk, or buy it through the course of time, maybe over the course of a few months when they get new hardscape orders. And you can now select the pieces that you think are ideal for what you're going to be working with. Now, this takes a longer amount of time if you're going to go through that process of getting every time that the store gets something in stock, or as you run around to different stores. Now, you may also want to just go on the internet and purchase a bulk order of stone or wood, so that way you can have more materials on hand than you would maybe be able to get locally. Now, the downside to this is that you don't actually know what you're going to get. However, the larger your order, the more likely that you're going to be getting things that fall in line with what you're looking for. You're going to get enough variety in the stone that you'll actually be able to come up with your idea if you're a bit more conscientious of the skills that are required in piecing that idea together. Now, let's say your creative process is visually driven and you actually need to see the materials before you sketch them. You can go through the process of analyzing the hardscape that you've purchased, looking for strategic elements that they provide you with, looking at the texture, any striata that is exposed or consistent with the other pieces of stones that you have. These are things that you want to think about and incorporate into your layout. And so it would make sense to incorporate that into your sketching process or using it as a driver for your sketching process. So in this case, we're going to be doing the same type of a layout where we have a primary stone, except we're now looking at the strengths of the materials and incorporating those into our layout, as well as for any secondary stones, which also have the same type of a pattern. And you will continue this process. And again, you're going to come up with a drawing which may or may not seem accurate at first. But again, the idea is that you're now working with actual elements. And the more that you do this, the better you're going to become at this skill. Now, you don't have to sketch it out and draw what you want to work with, but it's going to allow you to get a better understanding of the focal points in the aquarium and where you need to accentuate certain features of your layout. The key thing with the creative process is for you to identify what works for you. If you are the sketcher, then you proceed with the sketching. If you are the physical person and you need the physical elements in front of you, then that's your way of working. You need to understand that the way you work, and the earlier you understand the way you work, it's going to allow this process of design to be easier and more enjoyable for you. Now, you don't want to go out there, you don't want to create something that you're not going to like. You don't want to waste the time if it's not something that's going to be interesting to you. So creative process is very important in understanding you and how you think and how you work. After all, this is supposed to be a creative endeavor that you find interesting and that you enjoy participating in. So grab your paper, grab a pencil, start sketching, come up with your next layout. Let me know what your creative process is down in the comments. I'm looking forward to see if anybody else uses these techniques, or maybe there's something else that I'm missing that I haven't actually explored yet. And I'd be curious what that is and how I can actually use that to improve how I design in aquascaping. So until next time, this is Mark of the Aquatic Nature Studio.